The screen fades from black and haunting music begins to play as we see a smartphone illuminated in darkness with the Facebook Live logo glowing red against the shadows. And the date appears on screen, April 16th, 2017, Easter Sunday, Cleveland, Ohio, and a voice begins to narrate with gravity and sorrow. On a Sprint Ask America, we're celebrating Easter Sunday, gathering around dinners and tables, hunting for colorful eggs, and attending church services. An elderly man named Robert Godwin Sr. was walking home through his neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio, carrying a just plastic shopping bag and thinking about the wondering at plastic shopping bag. And just moments, his life would end, and most likely, Mary named Steve Stevens would murder him and occurred entire on this land. People would watch an innocent, gratifying people would not question technology as it were actually people were doing last time it why But Steve Stevens was not alone, because in recent you have witnessed a disturbing trend emerging from the depths of the internet, where killers broadcast their atrocities in real time, where violence becomes entertainment, where death becomes clickbait, and where social media platforms become stages for unspeakable horror. And today we will explore multiple cases of the terrifying phenomenon. And today we will explore multiple cases of phenomenon. People with one recent word for the they're alone. But before we begin this journey into Darley's provide a warning, because what we are about to discuss involves real violence, real victims, real families torn apart by senseless tragedy, and real questions about the world we live in today. So viewer discreetly advised. And if you are struggling with mental health, the investigation help, because they're meant to investigation into one of their most disturbing aspects of modern technology that Kella, who life streams as homo, the most mobility who life award the only crime. April 16, 2017 started Dewsbury in Cleveland, Ohio, with clear blue skies, warm sunshine, and families celebrating Easter Sunday across the city. And in churches throughout the community, people gathered to worship, to sing hymns, to celebrate resurrection and renewal, while children in their Sunday best dresses and tiny suits hunted for bright chocolate and power spring hidden in backyards, and joy of hope in the air, because Dave Stebbins was spiraling into a lit of him, burst so profound that one minute shot and while there's April 1 white. Steve Stevens was not that imagine when you think of a cold-blooded killer, because on the surface he appeared to be a normal, productive member of society working as a case manager at Beechbrook, a behavioral health agency in Cleveland that provided services to at-risk struggling with trauma and families struggling, was to help families to trauma and mental health issues, and his provide gadmos and unemployment started to kind of in the weeks leading to Easter 17, Stevens had been perceived as devastating personal failures, because his relationship with his girlfriend Joy Lane had ended, and he was taking the breakup extremely hard, obsessing over Blaine Emher for his unhappiness and spiraling into depression and anger. And in addition to his romantic depression, and his on the morning of Easter, disturbing messages on Facebook claiming that he was going to do something terrible and blaming Joy Lane for driving him to violence, and he wrote that she had destroyed him, that she had taken everything from him, that what was about to happen was some of his friends saw messages and trying to reaching him to follow, and so he kept first hand saying, but the time take us, and he goes, okay, or take people to talk to him, was like for a few minutes at a time, and thinking, well, it makes this cave so pretty, but I'm to him, take note from being April's last two bits message to Hazax Farfan, and the Godwin Sr. was some 4 years old, a retired worker who had spent decades working hard to support his family, and he was the father of 10 children and grandfather to 14 grandchildren, and his family called him Uncle Bob and knew him as a kind, gentle man with a warm smile and a generous heart who loved his family deeply and enjoyed simple pleasures like 20 grandchildren collecting in aluminum. Has spent the afternoon at a learned-day meal filmed like remember the warm Godwin walking alone on East 93rd Street, and he pulled his white Ford Fusion to the curb and got out of his car holding a smartphone in one hand and a .45 caliber Glock pistol in the other, and a .40 caliber Glock pistol in the other, and he approached the elderly man, and Rob Godwin looked at him with questions, because why else would someone question who doesn't this coin out the rations? They question of the seminary court on the road, and it's tasty been sale and safe. I'm recording to be kept from the clear the pump and the one actually work like one has this something down a upon about the Laura one Robert Godwin collapsed to the sidewalk, his plastic shopping bag falling and beside him, and his life ended instantly on that Cleveland street on Easter Sunday, while his killer stood over him recording the aftermath and feeling nothing, and Steve Stevens looked at his phone at the video. He just captured it in his white Ford Fusion, and he uploaded away, leaving rudder video to Facebook. The old darling Robert Godwin screaming had been shoving on the sidewall over and wondering, yeah, and it reminded him of a single mail to the one eye, and within many years desire, hey, there's a war mail. But Steve Stevens was not finished with his digital performance, because after uploading the murder video, he also went live on Facebook and claimed that he had killed 13 people that day, and he said he was going to kill more, and he blamed Joy Lane for a thing, and he's explaining that guy I could have murdered and that had no intention of stopping, and millions of people were running and panoramic with his seat could pay the murder was wonder what he was claiming, because murder wanted during the one that room the wall running for what the people coming and warning bar were and motor were. Cleveland began investigating, and they quickly determined that contrary to Steve Stevens' claims, he had not killed 13 people, because they could only confirm one victim, Robert Godwin Sr., but that did not make the situation any less terrifying, because even if Stevens had only killed one person so far, still danger is still on the run. In police chief claiming that Clayton would give in and police if Calvin and Temper Gainham's held an emergency press conference from the after back one person so far as those victims. Meanwhile, an alarm rate, because even though Steve Stevens had uploaded it to his Steve Steffens, had uploaded it to his personal page, people were downloading it into her Facebook, were downloading it and re-uploading it and sharing it to groups and pages, and millions of people were watching an elderly man being murdered in cold blood, and this raised serious questions phenomenon when in blood, because there's the perfect vibration process phenomenon of permanent for levels and policy for remaining blind, because they're at the time YouTube there's no such thing to take a path right. Jesus is only consuming them from Facebook issue is saying that they had disabled Steve Stevens' account within 23 minutes of receiving the first report about the video, but critics pointed out that 23 minutes is an eternity in time, and that millions of people view, share, and download content in less than half an hour, and the video had been online for much longer than 23 minutes before anyone reported it, because it took time for people to realize what we were watching, and it's effective content. Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook's CEO, eventually addressed the issue in a public statement, saying we need to do better and acknowledging that the company had to find ways to prevent this kind of content from appearing on their platform in the first place, rather than simply reacting after it had already gone viral. But for Robert Godwin's family, these coring statements and promises that rang horror off art was no taking the hollow, like the terminal moment in the tar domain, and that become a real, then it would be Corber, probably, the terror of them, For 40 after the murder, the national law enforcement agencies across multiple states searched for Steve Stevens because police believed he had fled Cleveland and might be anywhere in Ohio, Michigan, Virginia, Indiana, or even further, and the manhunt expanded to cover a multi-state area with police departments across the recount on high alert, and tips floated in from people claiming to have Steve Steffens and a hint from Morgan as prison, but mostly expected to be more urgent, where the quest for time a hybrid and when the sen it feels here for peeling for the world or from April 18, 20 after the murder, and Steve Stevens was still at large, and police were following leads, tracking his cell phone signal, monitoring social media for any new posts, and coordinating with law enforcement agencies across the country. Then at approximately 11:10 a.m., a McDonald's employee in Erie, Pennsylvania, a city about 100 miles from Cleveland, spotted into the drive and through when the girl pulled it on a few things. Steve Stevens shame it, but I think thinking like the important when I saw that I was with to pull it police were far more levy with law enforcement more than 4 days. When police about back the Whitehall 4th in the McDonald's parking lot, and they attempted to conduct a traffic stop, activating their sirens and lights and ordering Stevens to pull over, but instead of complying, Steve Stevens accelerated and a brief pursuit began, and police followed him through the street of Arium. Partner and the sheriff. And after the street, the weapons vehicle out of the car because in touch with all working and then he plus against other than Robert Cleveland a press conference announcing that the manhunt was over and that Steve Stevens was dead, and while there was relief that he could not hurt anyone else, there was also frustration and anger because his death meant that Robert Godwin's family would never get their day in court, would never hear him explain his actions, would never his crime and this for his governor's tram and this one the crew life this I had one of the team legs for during my microphone. This coming down this photo channel. What's that? Robert Godwin's laid to rest on April 20th in 2017, hundreds of people attended his funeral to pay their respects, to honor his memory, and to support his family, and his children spoke about their father, describing him as a kind, generous man who loved his family deeply, who worked hard at his study the way and deserves to in life, who never hurt anyone and finally doing. And his daughter, Tony Godwin Bain, said something remarkable and to life interview. But I'm sure well, they could have cake on the when of course we come from a panty was seeming a pathos for Edward others for hard and tell the wife with their story of where she's done. But while the Godwin family blooded to forgive, they are not ready to forget or to let Facebook off the hook for its role in allowing the murder video to go viral. And in January 2018, Robert Godwin's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Facebook, arguing of the company with a negligent hand to move it quickly of Robert Godwin's murder. And by all means, people to witness Robert Godwin crying as he allowed millions to that doesn't know their face that become emotion image distractions. And know that their face was an emotion. Robert Godwin's murder with the lawsuits, how loud their later on his Fiction tutored by arguing that they were protected by Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which shields internet platforms from liability for user-generated content, and they maintained that they had acted as quickly as possible to remove the video, and that they could not be held responsible on their platform, and ultimately the law users chose to post on their platform. The continue some embarrassment authority would have what kind of even Berlin's rule for publicly lost or used from rape the lawful. And the story of Steve Stevens and Robert Godwin is tragic, horrifying, and deeply disturbing, but unfortunately it is not unique because in the years since this Facebook murder there have been multiple cases of killers live streaming their crimes or brought for him, and each case has raised similar questions about technology, sex, and cooperant responsibilities. Now, Penetra's project work on technology case, only struggling what coming kind of really rule or to the world separate or magic war. And that comes more about other world. And on September 17th, experienced its own nightmare when a 19-year-old man named Ezekiel Kelly went on a shooting rampage across the city, killing 4 people, wounding 3 others, and live streaming parts of attack on Facebook Live. And for nearly 24 hours, Memphis was in terror as Kelly drove around randomly shooting, pulling 34-year-old wound on and ran the page to shut multiple more than there was coming to zero. Only my our crying when I was in With the city of Memphis went into lockdown with police issuing emergency alerts warning residents to stay indoors and avoid the area where Kelly was believed to be in schools where lockdown businesses closed early and people huddled in their homes watching the news and social media, trying to figure out what was happening at work frantically and the medication using Senate funding after merely fronting from the tip from the city of Kelly was a brand of farming Highlands and Church Chase, 14 family first degree murder, working with friends living full. As investigators pieced together Ezekiyu's background, they discovered some disturbing facts because Kelly had a prior criminal history and had previously been charged attempted first-degree murder in 2020 when he was just 17 years old. At the time, Kelly had been released for the severity of crime. Straight into just 6 months for about 13 since revelation can be drawn around because many for cruising Kevin and Australia could be released from Cutlery Corps people attempted murder. Elise. Beyond the criminal justice questions, the Ezekiel Kelly case also raised the same concerns about social media that had emerged in the Steve Stevens case because Kelly had used Facebook Live to broadcast portions of the video attack and worked to remove his Leshprostra entry were recorded by viewer and re-uploaded and shared across the internet and once become violent crime and had become viral content watched by thousands of people and become instance warrant the criminal justice of if the word uniform. In August 2025, Kelly pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and 27 other charges, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And during his sentencing hearing, his family members spoke of the pain and trauma and about how their lives have been Kelly's explanation for how their lives and briefly becoming a killing spree into the life stream or out of it. And since that what's been born on left, and our belief be former and more wild senseless law. We want to understand the absolute live stream violence. We must discuss what happened on March 15th, 2019 in Christchurch, New Zealand, when a far-right white supremacist terrorist named Brenton Tarrant attacked 2 mosques during Friday prayers, killing 51 innocent people, wounding 40 others. And I was streaming the entire massacre, understanding one of the most disturbed New Zealand's historic and what would become one of the super stuff, which you know, one of the just but what I that's a discernment kind of stare power, but on the devil is tall, the word one Year-old Australian man who had become radicalized online, consuming white supremacist propaganda on various internet forums, and becoming convinced that white people were being replaced by immigrants, and that violence was necessary to stop this perceived threat. In the months before it traveled to New Zealand and began plans in history and preparing Wexamasi to Moscow. It trusted as a husband to welcome the manifest the talking points, foreign with real toilet and many suffering. Where Western where beware and West What happened? Nevstream video and live streamed to Facebook for 17 minutes before the stream ended and Tarrant entered the Al-Noor Mosque while Friday prayers were taking place and worshippers were kneeling in prayer. And he opened fire with shooting discriminated automatic weapons and flew trying to protect them their love and third 10 and the mosque to contention he was conducting and he fired and met with reverse The death toll was devastating. 51 people murdered, including children. The wounded numbered 40 more, and the city of Christchurch and the entire nation of New Zealand was traumatized by the attack because New Zealand had always been seen as a peaceful, safe country where this kind of violence simply did not happen. And prime interest the nation was a nation of our and New Zealand Haiti and the North Zealand and they're emphasizing our immunity for the or William President will see when we're But while comparisons by Unity and the global response to the live stream video was deeply troubling, because even though Facebook removed the original live stream within minutes and a half of the ending, by that time the video had already been 4 hours after attack. Facebook removed 1.5 million content platform. Now one around the world watch the people around the Christchurch also revealed how the Kieran and from each other and using technology more effectively to maximize the impact of their violence, because Brenton Tarrant had clearly studied previous attacks and had specifically designed his assault to be visually dramatic, to be easily filmed to generate maximum shock value, and to be easily shared online, and to be easily seen as manifest to no one if it's the other mass. Many people attacking the left as first, the line was on a punted reference cuts as equal masters of line, always just me very recently, all my so I see my show, I show I'm showing on a version was possible. In response, took swift action passing new gun control laws within weeks of the massacre, banning semi-automatic weapons and implementing a gun buyback program, and the country also passed new laws making it illegal to possess or distribute the video of the attack, with penalties including up to 14 years in prison for sharing the footage. And Prime Minister replied, Prime Minister discussing their order and carries required commentators to see that comment Brenton Tarrant was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole the first time such a sentence had been imposed in New Zealand. And during his sentencing hearing, survivors and family members of victims gave no impact statements to powerful loss and trauma. The attack caused parents showed no remorse, offering no apology and no explanation beyond him as a human manifesto. So we have now examined the three major cases in Cleveland violence, Stephen Cleveland, Ezekiel Kelly, Memphis, and Brenton Tarrant and Christchurch. And while these cases differ in many ways, there are disturbing patterns and commonalities that emerge when we study them together, and understanding these patterns is crucial if we want to comprehend why killers tend to learn to fail, while it might be done to prevent future tasks. The first common line from the message we send is that lives in bullet, they're dead, and feel like life. And I feel like flash can come on key was less like felt perceived where Joy Lane was so devastating that it justified murdering a random stranger, and he wanted Joy Lane and the entire world to know about his pain and to witness what he claimed and she had driven him to do. And this is classic narcissistic thinking, because it places his emotional suffering at the center of the universe and treats other people not as human beings but their own lives, and their own lives in violate as prophets for her and for their own lives. The second connoted fame, him, or infamy, because all three killers wanted their names to be known, wanted their actions to be remembered, and wanted to achieve a kind of immortality through violence. And this is a phenomenon that has been documented by researchers who study mass, because many perpetrated, at least in part, related at least in part by a desire for recognition and for their names to be spoken and amplified, because this is an unpleasantable fame and infamy. Infamy, the world will be paved for it before them, the age and stuff, but one of them is one. Some criminal coverage of mass shootings and terrorist attacks inadvertently encourages copycat attacks by giving killers exactly what they want, fame, and they have called for a no-notoriety approach where news media would refuse to use to show their manifest refuse to focus entirely on victims and survivors, entirely letting to the goals and survivors would be to make it the name they seek, and they seek the new name is anything effective and our kind certainly the mammoth of fame they sexually works and call for it. Crething's cases is ideology or grievance, because all three killers believed that they had a message that the world needed. That message was Steve Stevens blaming his to hear, whether that message was Steve Stevens, Brennan Tarrant, promoting whites or praying from for us, praying his action to ideology. Executive Kelly's apparently more nihilistic, apparently more at what's particularly psychology and Calvary Williams, by live streaming other kinds of sexual utilization in the case of Preston and something clean. Whether it comes around with them, it's a set of our things, was fact, which is one of the most concerning aspects of live stream violence, because research has shown that media coverage of suicides and mass shootings can lead to copycat incidents inspired by what they see in the news and social media. And when it comes to the live stream violence, this direct, maybe even the video footage probably and similar how to provide as a flip template show me exactly mutual furthermore available online 4 years allowing a future Thus the question becomes what can be done to prevent live-streamed violence, and this is an enormously complex question without easy answers, because it involves balancing multiple competing values, including free speech, public safety, technological feasibility, and corporate responsibility in different people and organizations. Where the right balance lies is very different views. Some argue that social media companies need to implement monitoring prevalence of probably prevalence of less it is for definitely After Kernite host several changes to its live streaming policies, including implementing a one-strike policy where users who violated the platform's most serious policies would be immediately investing and prohibited from using Facebook Live, and investing in improved artificial intelligence systems to detect violent content more quickly and working more closely with law enforcement creative on personalities and financial consequences for allowing content bank pretend for the hosting of lawful research personal law for safety for Beyond the technology and Paulo Deeper's questions, there are all the societal issues at play, because the rise of the glorification of violence is symptomatic of broader problems, including the glorification of violence in media and entertainment, the ISO chambers, the radicalization of resources in crisis, the easy available informs from a firearm, But while we grapple with these systemic quests, we must not lose sight of the individual human beings at the center of these stories, the victims whose lives were stolen from them and whose deaths were turned into content. And it is crucial that we remember Robert Godwin Sr., not as the old man in the viral video, but as a real person who had a full life, who turned dreams and loved his family, who worked hard, who had hope, and who was just wanted people like her in our Killability Crest Church who would be part of a community. And I know we don't remember to be structure be boiled up death for when roller and said one I don't know Robert Godwin Zawin Bain said something profound in an interview after her father's murder when she talked about forgiveness, and said that choosing to forgive did not mean forgetting, did not mean that what happened was okay, and did not mean that it did not mean can be consequences, but rather that holding hatred. The pain raising that is one Steve's tragedy is remarkable and such as powerful encounter. Choosing if narrative for affect men and forgiving one seems they might experience the powerful calling like out saying with sorrow with As we reflect on these cases and on the violence more broadly, we must ask ourselves difficult questions about the kind of society we want to live in and the kind of online culture we want to create, because every time we click on a violent video, every time we share graphic content, real human tragedy as entertainment, because this kind of animal culture, art enables, and we culture and we choose to refeed it through felt, so sheer world and culture, and it comes through violence on the culture, when we converges this current word and like the fail of the part of culture. There are all steps that each of us can take to help prevent violence and support those who may be at risk, because if you see concerning posts or threats on social media, you can report them to the platform and to lawmakers who seem to be struggling with mental law enforcement. And if you have friends or family members who fracturally mental health issues or who are expressing them all for support and help the network connect and all sorts of things. If they can balance fear, hyper healing, good care, ever prevailing care, people family defense of faith word violence and our stressful information, fair virus, all resource, and United Born and Earth for and for real law enforcement for health officers doing that. We must have policy changes that can help address this issue, including better funding for mental health services, stronger gun safety laws, improved training for law enforcement on how to identify and respond to threats moderation policies that tech companies and research will solve tech company research and must hold a root single policy false problem concept and it must much of must to relate for all things and more working opportunity and feeling country affairs on war ground well close complementary in the same. The story of Steve Stevens and Robert Godwin is now more than 7 years old, but its lessons remain urgently relevant because live-streamed violence continue to emerge in the fundamental questions raised by the Facebook murder about technology or psychology, about media ethics, and about still grappling with core benefits. That's Trump really and benefits violence, and we are still trying to commit acts of evil, what might be done to it. What about if the money for that even as we struggle with these difficult questions, we can find hope in the resilience of survivors and the strength of families like the Godwins who choose forgiveness and the courage of communities like Christchurch that refuse to be defined by tragedy and in the countless ordinary people who respond to reach out those in pain, to make the world viral, may every day to make a little generous by the limest than earth, where they're because they to the water, As we conclude this examination of the killers who seek digital infamy, we must remember that behind every statistic, every news headline, every viral video, there are real human beings, real life is real families, and we have to take this issue seriously to then forever change to ban because violence, where we owe it to, and we commit ourselves to creating under their own participation for all kind of penalties, count and use it, human ultimate down to human human value or something that our past and what's war want to make sure war violent. Who live-streamed his own crime, wanted to be remembered, wanted to be famous, wanted his name spoken and his actions discussed, but we have a choice in how we remember these events, and we can choose to remember the victims, to speak their names, to honor not forgotten, while the killers fade and choice that credit and nurture that and turns about 10 alerts, and we can choose to learn about for those who make scary alliance of getting some messages, what's the places to the world of clicks and buttons on get more for by our forever on the portals as I wait for work clues and sure where I feel terrible. So as you finish watch this documentary, I encourage you to reflect on what you have learned, to think about the choices you make online, about what you watch, what you share, what you say, and how you treat others. And I encourage you to reach out if you or someone you know is struggling, because help is available and life is precious, and there are always alternatives to violence. And I encourage you, no matter how hopeless a situation may is in their humanity, other than the name like they're doing the places that supporting including places and aliens, wrong thing of if you're available, Lilas, who's coming and more. Thank you for watching the disturbing documentary about the killer who live-streamed his own crime and the broader phenomenon of violence in the digital age, and I hope that this has given you insight into these tragic events, into the psychology of the perpetrators, in the failures of social media platforms, and into the resilience of victims and survivors, and I hope that it has inspired you, shaping all about the art. If you found it, share and share If you are struggling with mental health issues or having thoughts of violence or self-harm, resources are available. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 988 and provides free confidential 10407 support. Be reached by texting HAMM to 7441. And there are many other mental health resources available online, and your community out for help. It's not a spread and how to sign up. It's care, life is value, and the world needs. one for boys. I don't one is to see. Documenting Tree on the Killer, who live-streamed his own crime, examining the cases of Steve Stevens, Ezekiel, Kelly, Breton Tarrant, and others, exploring the psychology behind live-streamed violence, discussing the responsibility of social media companies, and analyzing the impact on victim and communities, and what can be done to prevent these tragedies in the future. And while there are no easy answers, and while other challenge to try to work and to demand partly to walk the possibility of award one fraction our wire. Surrounding the law.